So we're here at the mortuary, hidden away at the side of the St Mary's Parish Church here in Youghal, and with me I have Frankie Keane, a well-known local historian and author of St Raphael's Centre and Up the Youghal Boys, and Liam Ryan, the sacristan here in the church. Frank, the mortuary here. I'd like to just talk about like funerals, customs and traditions in the town and in the country as well. But we're here in the mortuary. Can we just go back, tell me about the building of the mortuary itself? It's up against the cliff here where there's a lot of damp. It looks a bit dreary hidden back here.
Well, as a young boy, I suppose, you know, we all came up the side here, the right-hand side of the church, to the mortuary, because I suppose there were the days prior to the Vatican Council, more or less, Liam, and a lot of sadness. And of course, looking at it now, you know, it brings back an awful lot of memories to me, because I suppose people of every, what would you say, walk of life, whether they were rich or whether they were poor, you know, they all went into this building prior to changes in church law. And that was, of course, Liam, I think, would agree with me. He attended many of those funerals, etc. Like, you couldn't come into the church, Liam, that particular time.
At that particular time, no. What actually used to happen was, when the funeral would come to the front gate below, one of the priests would be there to meet it. The De Profundis would be recited as they come up the yard. And then they come up to the mortuary, where I would have the 2 trestles and the 6 candles lighting. And the priest would say a few more prayers, all in Latin, of course, and then they would say a decade of the rosary. And after that, then people would disperse and go away. So you wouldn't have any more than we say until tomorrow.
So how many people would you fit in there? It's kind of like, it's smaller than I thought, so you just have the immediate family.
The immediate family, that's what everybody else stood in the yard outside. And that's the way it was at that time.
But so the mourners would be outside. Would they at some stage then come in? They'd join in the prayers and all that.
They would do all that, yeah.
Would they come in and do handshaking as we know it now?
They would do that, definitely. And there was a big notice then up in the water still there that the coffins must not be opened in the mortuary at any time.
And was it a specific amount of candles that were lit there as well?
6. They were on high candles, and there was a number 4s. This very thick candle, and would last for the duration of the funeral.
What was the laying out of the corpse? Would that have been done somewhere else? I'm just wondering if the person died at home. Was there certain women that were involved in the laying out of a corpse? What was that kind of tradition?
There was that. That was a tradition.
At that particular time, you see, a lot of the corpses, like those, in a traditional way, they died at home. And of course, you had ladies who would come in. I remember Lord and Mrs. Finn, who died recently. She was 106 years old, right. And she was a great woman to lay out corpse, you know, with the white sheets and all that type of thing. Annie Griffin was another great woman. And my longest memory of Mrs. Finn laying out a particular corpse, mentioning no names, but closing the eyes with 2 pennies.
Yeah.
They closed the eyes, they put 2 lops, as we call it.
Lops, yeah.
And
the eyes.
And the eyes.
Yeah, and they'd be there for...
Did you call that the way you used to call those old pennies? They were lops?
Lops.
Like that, right?
Lops, yeah. You remember the name? Lops.
I know that.
Yeah, I
but that tradition, it was specifically, and it was kind of like white.
White cheese.
It was all white cheese.
Yes,
and these were kind of specific women, more elderly women, I suppose.
They certainly were,
that would have...
Yeah, well, they were the 2 women that I particularly remember. And of course, another, I suppose, tradition that time was habits.
Oh, yes.
Brown for men, was it blue for women?
That is correct.
Frank, can you just tell me something about the mortuary itself, the building? There's some inscription on over the door there?
James O'Malley. It was erected by James O'Malley MacDonald. He was the Lieutenant Colonel in the Bengal Army and it was built in 1909. And you can imagine now, Mike, and of course Liam will verify, the number of corpses that passed through that building prior to the changes in Catholicism.
Quite true, quite true.
And of course, I suppose some famous names and some down and out names, but at the end of the day, we're all one.
Everyone ended up there at one stage.
It doesn't matter, rich or poor, what we have in material things in this life, at the end of the day, it didn't matter.
So would this lieutenant in the British Army, would he have donated that to the parish priest or to the church at the time?
James O'Malley donated it. And it was a miniature chapel, Liam.
I think it was at that time.
A miniature chapel.
Massive, we said that.
That's correct, yeah.
And there's still the altars in at the back.
Yeah.
And the priest would be, of course, we were black vestments, and that was it.
Yeah.
No,
and of course the corpses that remained there overnight, Liam.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There was no such thing as present day rules of the corpse coming into the church, you know.
So like where I'm, like people are accustomed to now, when they go to a funeral, the coffin is right in front of the altar.
Oh, certainly.
But that was never the case back then.
No. At that time, the person's mass would be 8 o'clock in the morning. And if you had, some people had a high mass, which took 4 priests and you had 4 altar servers at that particular mass. The undertakers would come in for this particular mass, take the coffin out, come in through the sacristy and bring it into the church. And they had 2 extra tussles in there, and again the candles. I never, at that time, it was only in the later years that I saw the Paschal candle being used there.
So when you say there was a high mass, was there kind of a hierarchy?
In a
class kind of a way then, compared to...
compared to Joe Soap.
Joe Soap, all right, okay.
Oh, absolutely,
right.
yeah. Now, you had, as I said, you had a celebrant, a deacon, a subdeacon, and the master ceremonies, and 4 altar boys. You would, at the end of Mass, the crucifix would be presented, the 2 acolyte candles would take the 2 or 4 would be there, and the incense man.
So, like funerals, as we know, there can be expensive. So, if it was people had more money back then, you were in for the high mass kind of thing.
You were on the button.
But of course, there was a lot of sadness that time too. And this, looking at the mortuary, it's still standing since since it was erected in 1909. But there was a lot of sadness in the sense because the surrounds were sad.
Oh, they were, yeah.
The walls were weeping, etc. You know. You go to a funeral now. I don't remember that particular time any eulogies, Liam.
No.
The priest would say the eulogy more or less. But the sadness, it was there the whole time. Whereas there's a lot of brightness about funerals now.
So the corpse would remain in the coffin, in the mortuary.
Yeah.
The people who go to Mass in the morning,
That's right.
they'd go away, and then they come back then later in the afternoon around 3 o'clock or whatever.
Happens to 3 o'clock.
To go to the actual funeral.
To the actual funeral.
I think in that particular time, there was very few funerals in the mornings at that time,
Mostly happens to 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Then the police would come in here to the sacristy, and they would the bell would start ringing around 2:45, a single stroke. And after that, then come 3 o'clock, which if it was at 3 o'clock, the priest would go out, they'd recite the prayers again outside, and then the whole had to go down the yard.
There was a mortuary in the community hospital, which no longer exists. It's been gone with many years. I remember attending, what would you call them? They weren't, I suppose they're wakes more or less, weren't they?
Yeah, well, yeah.
In the mortuaries, but most when people died that time, the wake was at home. When people came in and out and they offered their condolences, etc., and of course, an awful lot of people came. They mightn't even know the corpse or know the people, but they know was being provided. There was plenty drink, there was plenty sandwiches, etc. You know. Now, Youghal at that particular time, as you know, getting back, we said to 909, there was a lot of poverty existed in the town, etc. Like, the only means, I suppose, of prosperity was a bit of fishing. We had no industries whatsoever, like, you know, but fishing, etc. And an awful lot of, I suppose, next of kin, there were fisher people.
Quite true, Frank.
You know, they came from the lanes and all that type of thing, like, you know. Like
the Wyman Lane or
the Wyman Lane or the Cork lanes and all
and
that type of thing, like, and all the different lanes around the town.
So it was a big thing to visit the house
Of
then
course,
or something like that.
wonderful thing to visit a house, like, you know.
Go back to what you mentioned there, Frank, about the wakes. Do you remember the wakes where there was like the Keane women would be involved, or it would be card playing and all that, going way back? Would you remember any of that?
I don't remember it, but like
you're aware of it. I mean,
we hear about it.
Yeah, we heard about it and we read about it, but and we learned about it from our elders, in the sense like most of it, I suppose, was confined to the rural areas, and I suppose we were being told about the clay pipes and all that type of thing,
and the snuff,
you know, and it goes back to the Clancy's famous song, I suppose, you know, when the cops. When the drink started, the cops sat up in the bed.
So the first thing they gave was the snuff, the smokes, the drinks.
That's right, yeah.
I heard one time that the card playing would take place as well, and they believed that the body was still parked in the room, and they'd put a deck of cards in the corpse's hand, and that's where we would have heard from the westerns and all that of Dead Man's Hand. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But was there a was there a difference between a town and a country?
Oh, there was.
Big difference.
Yeah.
Oh, big difference.
And even to this day, Mike, if you go to a rural funeral, you know, the crowds of people. Just take, for instance, Inch now. Correct. You know, you notice like everybody, I suppose, every inhabitant around the Inch area. I'm just taking Inch now as
an example,
etc. But everybody knew everybody else. Whereas, like, you look at, I suppose, Youghal at the moment. Youghal has expanded so much, Mike, over the years, etc. An awful lot of the traditions that we had, because there's an influence of new people who have come into the town, etc. And of course, we're losing an awful lot of the old traditions that we have. Now, I'm 74 years of age, Liam is 77, etc. And of course, we grew up with a lot of that. Now, I don't remember the queening, but Mrs. Finn, the 106-year-old, I learned quite a bit from Mrs. Finn in the sense, because she was Ballymacoda bred and born, and she told me about some of the great traditions that were in Ballymacoda at that particular time, and the clay pipes, and the snuff, and the cairn playing, and of course the caffling.
Yes.
What was that, sorry?
The caffling. There'd be caffling as well, you see.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you explain that word?
Yeah, she often told me about, you know, fellas, like open fires at that time, and fellas there'd be thatched roofs, of course, and fellas might climb up on the roof if they weren't allowed in, if there was something, and they'd block the chimney with straw or something, and they'd smoke fill the room and everything would run out, and the cops could be left alone.
Speaking of traditions, and you mentioned Inch there, I was told from a person from Inch that it was, if there was a death in the family, that it was an honour if you were asked to dig the grave. They'd ask a neighbour or a friend that was close to the family to actually dig the grave, and that was a sign of it was an honour to do that.
That's correct, yeah. That's correct.
See, that was one of the old traditions again, you know. And especially in the rural areas, you know, like, whereas nowadays you see you have a little mini digger or thing like that. Even though, like even in our own North Abbey, like the grave diggers still exist, but it was all grave diggers at that particular time. You know?
Would it be when you said a difference between town and country? Would it be a difference between West Cork And East Cork traditions,
Oh,
and even West
certainly.
Waterford, and would you know any of them?
Yeah. West Cork, of course,
West
like, were
Cork,
very
yeah.
traditional.
Very
you know,
traditional.
because they had an awful lot to do with. I won't say they were backward, but like an awful lot of the West people came east. You know,
I've heard that, yeah.
I don't think we were any better than them, but like we seem to have, I suppose, they had their own brogue.
Well, in the early days of St. Raphael's, which was a
Yeah.
big employer,
Yeah.
I mean, there was a massive amount from West Cork came
That's
up there
right.
then. I
Yeah.
think,
Well, of
wasn't it?
course, I learned so much. Like the greatest accolade I could give the residents of St. Raphael's was that I learned more from the residents in St. Raphael's than I ever learned in school. Because to sit down there at the fireplace on a wet day like we have this afternoon, etc., and go back to those old psychiatric residents from the likes of Cape Clear and all those places, Skibbereen, Bantry and all those. Oh my goodness, what I learned from them. What I learned about life from those people. They had very little, and they had some very sad stories about how they ended up in Our Lady's Hospital in Cork or in St. Raphael's in Youghal.
Now, speaking of St. Raphael's, Frank, because you worked there all your life, but there's a mortuary up there as well.
Certainly,
And as
yeah.
children, when we were walking past that at night time, we ran past it. We'd always kind of like a fear of it was kind of haunted or ghosts or
yeah.
something like that. Was that it?
Well, it was always like mortuaries, I suppose, they were scary places
Yeah, well, yeah.
in our youth. You know, we were told, you know, if you're passing by, don't look or run as fast as you can. No, in fairness to the corpse that would be present there, he or she certainly wouldn't do anything to any of it.
No, absolutely.
So after here, then when the funeral would get on the way with the hearse, do you remember? Do you remember the horse-drawn hearses? Was that before your time?
It would be, it was Peter Egan had all the funerals at that time, before Wallace came in there to do some of the work. But it was always the hearse they had. There was only once or twice I saw horses. When we got through there a few years ago, to Bill Smithy's funeral, if I have my name correct, and they had the carriage and the horses in front, out in Gertrude Church.
And the priest would walk in front as well then?
No, he drove, well they should, but he drove, because to go to Clanbree Cemetery from Gertrude Church is a mile or two.
It's a bit of a walk from here as well, isn't it? From St. Mary's Parish Church out to North Abbey?
Could be, yeah.
Is that kind of unusual in that, or is the graveyards usually connected, adjacent to the church?
Well, you see, the parish church, like you must remember that the North Abbey, the mass yard, and getting back to what I said at the outset of our conversation here, Mike, like when the North Abbey was no longer in use, when all the different things that happened, which we won't go into here today, but like this particular site was the worst site they could get in the town, because you see we were under British rule at the time, and of course, I suppose they weren't very accommodating.
And when you say the site, we're talking about where we are now in St. Mary's Parish Church here. It's bang right up against the cliff here.
It's in a quarry in actually, and that's why the walls are weeping. It said, and of course Liam would tell you it was there, like the dampness that existed prior to central heating and everything inside there. And you can imagine like coming in here on a cold, wet November, December morning, as Liam Ryan would verify, even the vestments would be damp, Liam.
So the other churches would be more in a prime spot kind of thing?
When you look at the Strand Church, the erection of the Strand Church, like in the 30s,
or St. Mary's Collegiate Church, or the Methodist Church.
Well, Roger, you must remember, Michael, that St. Mary's Collegiate Church was originally the Catholic Church. Reformation, of course.
Michael, you asked me a while ago about the graveyards. I attended a funeral in West Cork one time, in a place called Kilfockenabeg, and there were 5 gates going into it. And when everybody was coming out, there was a lady and a gentleman at each gate. The lady got wine and the men got whiskey. But I'd say it's kind of done out now because, for the one simple reason, is fellas would go out one gate and come back in another one. You couldn't watch it. You just couldn't. But I attended that funeral.
But when you attended the funeral, it was always a thing as well, wasn't it, to be seen at a funeral? You know, and I suppose that's where a lot of politicians would turn up as well.
Oh, yeah.
But in fairness to politicians, they would turn up, you know what I mean? Not just for getting a couple of votes, we'll say, but I've been told, especially out in the country, that if you didn't turn up for a funeral, it was kind of a slight, or a kind of you just turned up and that was it.
Yeah, but it was recognised. And the first question they'd always ask you, if you were at a removal prior to the funeral, etc. I can remember it well above St. Raphael's, with the Charles Justice, Frank, we had the removal last night. I was, Johnny or Liam, said, were you seen?
Yeah, I've had that.
Meaning?
Yeah.
Were you there?
If the next of kin saw you, yeah, everything was okay. But if you weren't seen, you might be there, but you had to be seen. You had to go up and you had to sympathise, etc. Otherwise, you know, that slide could be held against you.
And of course, when funerals were taking place, when they left here going through town, the businesses and the shoppers, they'd shut their front doors and turn off the lights as they passed.
That is quite true. And
the respect.
That's right.
Does that happen now?
No.
Well, it certainly do with Neville's.
Might be with Neville's, but that'll be...
Neville's are one of the old traditional shops, like, and all.
But lights out, doors shut, blinds down, curtains drawn.
Oh yeah.
And of course, even must go back to the priest, the attire
yes, there is that
on a funeral.
No, not on every funeral, but we say some funerals. You had what they call the white sashes on the priests, and on the hats they had a white band around their hat, and the edges were tied with black ribbon. Now. The priests at that time they wore black hats. No, they were mostly the parish priest and the curates. They had a hat called an Anthony Eden, and the band was on that, and the sash on them. And they walked from the church to the graveyard. If it was raining, they had their umbrellas. Oh yeah.
And the Anthony Eden hat was that famous hat that the British Prime Minister used to wear back in the day.
That is true. Another man that used to wear that hat in town was Dr. Kevin. He was down there in South Abbey. He used to go around around to his patients on a bicycle.
So was it a kind of a status hat symbol?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, the great cant at that time, like when all this change was, I remember above in St. Raphael's was, and of course I suppose, shouldn't be saying it, not alone on their hatless, but they're legless.
But as I say, no, that was the hat.
But talking about like the what people would wear, would mourners or the family also wear a symbol as well? Did wear black? Did wear black? But did wear for the following year, I think. And
the diamond.
There was another one. The diamond on the shoulder.
Can you tell me about that?
The diamond just replaced on the left. It was left, yeah. I remember when.
And would the women and men would wear it?
They would, yeah.
No, men only. Men with diamond, but the women would wear black for 12 months.
That's right, yeah.
12 months.
And what did the diamond signify?
That you had a death in the family.
Right. And do you remember people wearing the diamond?
Yeah. I had it for my own dad, you know, back in 1978. Yeah.
And you'd wear that for a full year?
Well,
to sewn on. And you got the diamond. I'm not sure what's a Joe Broderick.
Jimmy McGuan.
Jimmy McGuan used to do it. And Jimmy McGuan used to sell the Anthony Eden hat.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's right. Now the habits, you could get one of those at Willie Neville's or Joe Broderick's.
That's right.
But the white linen, that was supplied by Joe Broderick only.
You mentioned earlier on, I think, about the removals. Removals nowadays, they're almost bigger sometimes than the funerals themselves.
Absolutely.
And why is that?
To be honest with you, I don't really know.
Well, of course, I suppose you see with working and people commuting now, whereas everything in town, we had the factories and everything there, you see, and naturally, like, people in the morning now, they go early, they drive down to Ringaskiddy, they go to Clonmel, they go everywhere, come home in the evening and they attend a removal, or they just attend, the removals are there's a different setup.
Way different now.
Yeah.
I remember when I was growing up, and people listening now might think it's kind of morbid or something like that, but my father would get the Cork Examiner, the paper, and the first thing would be open up was the obituary page.
Correct.
You know, it was just to see who did and the dates. Now you hear it, of course, on the local radio, community radio, but that was the thing, to look up the dates.
Every man in my family used to get the paper, and the first page, whatever to be in the obituary column, that's what he wanted to look at.
But getting back to the horse drawn there, like, the Guinens were the last. Guinens. With the horse drawn carriages that particular time,
correct.
you know.
And the O'Briens.
They lived in Cork Hill.
Pat O'Brien.
The O'Briens. They had where Bowmaker Buse is now.
That's correct.
Next to Tony O'Leary's house there now, you know. I'll always remember the auction there. Were a young boy, but the auction there, I can still see it. Two things that remain with me was a penny farthing bike.
That's right.
And the old horse drawn. And the two of them, on the day of the auction, were unsold.
But Wallace's was another undertaker
Oh,
as well here,
yeah.
Would you remember them?
Oh, I would, very well. Remember Jerry Wallace?
And of course, Jack Egan.
Jack Egan. Jack and Pete.
I always remember a great saying with Jack Egan was, "You may be going around for years and years, but I nailed you in the end."
So, like, there was always a bit of, I know when we started off the conversation about the sadness and the mourning, but there was an element of, as things went along, you know, a bit of joviality, a couple of jokes would have been thrown into.
But one particular priest I must mention there, like, for joviality, as you call it, is, and he brought great enjoyment, I think, it was Father Jackie Corkery.
Oh, I did, Jackie. I remember Jackie well.
Jackie Corkery, like, you know. You'd be down and out there, like, you know, your parents or your sister or brother or your best friend, etc. But he'd come in and he'd brighten the whole church, in the sense he'd say, look, they're all above, they're all delighted, they're all at the banquet table, they're drinking whiskey, they're drinking wine, they're smoking pipes, they're smoking woodbines, etc. And that, you know, it's lovely to hear that, because death should not be mourned. I know there's a lot of tragedy, like we all know it hits everybody from time to time, but like there's a lot of enjoyment too, in the sense, like, you know, people come together, your friendships, they're built, you know, people generally, they're very good here.
And of course the old one, a lot of rows were settled.
Oh yeah.
Were settled.
But actually settled during the course of the thing, over a pint or two.
Yes, right. And then on the other side of the coin, there was a lot of rows took place, and they were black for years.
Another guy I would like to mention there as well, we couldn't go without talking about him, but it was Peter Egan. Peter Egan, I would remember coming into the CYMS, and ye would know Peter well. Yeah. But we always had, again, it was a bit of a thing that we had when we were young fellas. Peter would come in and he'd be looking at you up and down, you know, and this thing was that he was taking a look at your measurements. Did you?
I often heard that, Mike. I did, and of course we can't forget Dick Keefe, you was with him. They were just a partnership.
But there was a change, Frank, I think, had changed from that, where the corpse and the coffin was kept outside in the mortuary, to what we know now at a funeral, where the coffin is right up in front of the altar, and sometimes there's a photograph there, or there's... When did that come in, and who were responsible for that?
Well, the parish councils, I think, you know, where people, you know, had an input into church, etc. Legal can go back there, you know, and I think, was it Canon Dwyer was in situ at the time?
For the parish council. Canon Dwyer.
Yeah, and I, you know,
that was a big thing to bring the coffin in.
Well, there was a proposal at a parish council meeting, because I can go back to it, because St. Raphael's, I suppose, in the sense, you see, the fact that it was governed by the poor servants of God for many, many years, etc. And of course the laws of the church had to be observed, you know. But I remember, like, when they got their freedom, we'll say, when a matron came in, when the poor servants of God, etc., like, you know, when they handed over, and Matron Hurley came in, etc., and it broadened people's minds too, etc., because, like, we were living in a very dark age, I thought, at that particular time, you know, and the changes brought a lot of brightness into the church. And of course we can't forget Pope John the 23rd, you know. Father Tom Paul's famous statement, he opened the windows and he left in a hurricane. You know?
Father Tom Paul.
And I think, you know, whilst we do criticise, I suppose, the fact that we're all, I suppose, church-going people, but we do criticise the church from time to time. But, like, there was a lot of good came out of all those particular meetings, etc. Like, that was one particular thing, because at the outset we were talking about the darkness of the mortuary, the weeping wall and all that type of thing, and the corpse. When you left the mortuary and went to your home at night, you didn't sleep, you thought, here they are, they're above in a cold, wet, damp place, etc. Whereas now, like, the whole scene has changed.
Thanks very much for taking your time for talking to me. This great story about the mortuary, and I have no doubt whatsoever that both of you gentlemen will be getting the high mass. Is that what you call it?
We've done it on Mikey.
We'll be looking like if we're not in jail.